Welcome to Privet Palm Beach Presents, bringing you everything Palm Beach. Coming to you from our active storefront studio in the exciting new Nora District.
This episode of Privet Palm Beach Presents is brought to you by Caprock, a privately owned multifamily office serving Palm Beach and beyond. Caprock provides independent wealth advisory and investment services for families, foundations, and institutions. Learn more at caprock.com.
This week brings us Good Day Palm Beach, with hosts JAYNE Chase, Jack Lynch, and Carolina BUIA. Be sure to subscribe, follow, like, and share our multiple channels in the show notes.
Well, there are two little announcements I need to make, everybody, before we really get into asking JAYNE all these questions. One is that this podcast is brought to you by Privet.com. And we are a brand new podcast and digital platform show called Good Day Palm Beach. And it airs on Privet and all of our social medias, my social media, my other two hosts, Jack Lynch and Carolina BUIA. And we're talking to everybody in Palm Beach who's doing really interesting things. And we know that our town is growing and expanding, and there are lots of people here that are doing really interesting things. Case in point. And the second thing is that JAYNE is speaking on Monday, December 8th, at the Flagler Museum, where there is an exhibit, a retail exhibit, right, JAYNE? That's going to run through April. And you guys shouldn't miss that either. That'll be really fun. And it's nice the Flagler is really coming back strong and becoming a part of our community. So what time is that, December 8th? Do you know what time that is?
Sorry?
On Monday? Do you know when that is? At 5 to 7 or something like that? I don't know.
Don't ask me tough questions.
We will get you that information. So maybe Deborah will send it out to everybody in the building. Anyway, okay, without further ado, I want to start by telling you guys that when JAYNE started writing this book, he would send me chapters here and there. And when I read the first chapter, I called him at like 11 o'clock at night in tears. And I said, this is such a winner. And the opening scene, for you that you haven't read it, I'm sorry, this is a little bit of a spoiler. There's a great scene that I think really defines who JAYNE is. He's come back from Los Angeles, where he's decided he doesn't want to be in the film industry, but he needs a job and he needs a place to live. So he moves in with his grandfather. And there's a great scene of them coming down in the elevator in the morning because he's got a ride to BARNEYS, and his grandfather is wide as he is tall in a three-piece suit, and JAYNE is with long hair and in jeans. And I think that really defines so much of who you are, that you love family and you learn so much from your grandfather, your father, and your mother. So will you begin to share that stuff with everybody?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I never wanted to be in the family business, which was started by my grandfather, Barney Pressman, in 1923. Actually, like many young students, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but that was a period when we had the Vietnam, so we knew we had to go to college, otherwise we'd end up over there. And my father was very clever, somebody I always loved and respected, and he never pushed me to ever do anything. And I wanted to be in some kind of media entertainment business, so I went to the Newhouse School at Syracuse and studied film. And I went, as JAYNE said, I went to Hollywood, and I came to the realization that there were a lot of unemployed 21-year-old film directors. So after doing a few films as Gopher, I got discouraged. I came back, and I really didn't want to live in my family house. I'm much older than my siblings. And so one Sunday night dinner, my grandfather, Barney, who was never a loss for words, he came right out and says, okay, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, I'd like to move to New York. Because good, you can come live with me. So it was bachelor number 1 and bachelor number 2. He being 80 and myself being 22. So moved in with him, and I decided, okay, I'll give Barney's a try. So we take the chauffeur-driven caddy down to 17th Street every morning, and he would go to the C suite, and I'd go into the warehouse. I was the owner's son, so I was very sensitive about going to the C suite. So I decided I'd start in the warehouse, and I started merchandising immediately the warehouse. I hated the way it looked. They started putting things around.
That was your idea to go to the warehouse, not his idea?
No, my idea.
Okay.
And the story goes on. But it was an interesting, for 6 months, I lived with my grandfather, and he would say to me, don't bring any women back here. And I would go, okay, Grandpa, sure. And it was an interesting 6 months. And then I finally moved into my own digs.
Well, what did you learn from your grandfather and your father in terms of the retail business? I mean, what were their secrets that they passed on to you? And your mom too, Phyllis, she was so involved.
Well, my family, you know, being in a family business can be wonderful, and it can be not so wonderful. And it has its quirks. But I was lucky because our business was an incredible business, and I was very lucky to be given the opportunity. And my grandfather, he was sort of now ready to retire. Actually, he didn't want to retire. My father kind of said, you're retiring. And my father was the kind of guy that would let me do what I wanted, and he left me alone, and he trusted me. Maybe he regretted it sometimes, but he really gave me a lot of space to be creative. And both of them were incredible merchants. My grandfather was one of the greatest promoters I've ever seen. You know, Barney's started out very humbly in 1923 as a 500 square foot hole in the wall down in Chelsea. And in those days, downtown didn't really exist. You didn't have Soho, you didn't have Tribeca. Chelsea was warehouses and tenements. And quite frankly, people that lived uptown, they never went below 42nd Street because they were afraid they'd get a nosebleed. So it was an interesting experience because we had to build this amazing mousetrap to get people to come down to Barney's. And in those days, it was all men's. It started out as a men's discount store. In the 1960s, Ripley's made the claim that it was the largest men's store in the world. We had many, many women come to the store because men hated to shop, especially in those days. So women would always come down and pick out their outfits for them. And the clever ones would go down into the basement where the boys' department was and buy some things that were boys that would fit them, because obviously they were much less expensive than women's clothes. My father, he was just a brilliant merchant. I was very lucky because at a very young age, he took me all over Europe and introduced me to so many things that I would not have had the opportunity to experience. He loved art, he loved architecture, obviously. He loved beautiful things, and so did my mother. So that exposure sort of molded me in a sense. Started in London in the 60s, which in those days was the center of the universe, between the British invasion, the rock and roll, the way people dressed. It was a wild place. Of course, we went to Paris, we went to Italy, we went all over, and it was amazing. And then he said, you're going to Israel. Or my mother actually said, you're going to Israel. I didn't really have any interest to go to Israel, but she said, no, you're going. You have to learn about your roots. I said, okay. So for my graduation, I went to Israel. I had no idea what to expect, but I came back after a week loving it. I was shocked. This was in 1968, so right after the Six-Day War. And of course, in those days, Israel was at an all-time high. And then we went to Istanbul, which was really cool. It was a completely different culture that also blew me apart. And then I was supposed to go home, and my parents were going to go on their second honeymoon. And my mother says, you know, you've been really good on this trip. We're going to take you with us. So we went to the south of France. This is before Saint-Tropez. I am old. And we went to Cannes, stayed at the Carlton. And we hadn't been there more than 10 minutes. And I'm telling you all this because this is how we work together. We work together, we live together as a family, we laugh together. It was a very unusual affair. And we hadn't been in Cannes in more than 10 minutes. And we run across the street to where the beach is. And the beach boy was setting up the chairs. And all of a sudden, this gorgeous, I think she was South American woman in her 20s, comes up to my father and starts, you know, introducing herself to him. And my mother goes, you don't want him, you want him. and points to me. And I won't tell you, it goes on. I don't see my parents for 3 days after that. They were thrilled. I definitely got educated. And one night, we went to this woman and I went to, she was a bit older than I was. We went to this nightclub. The nightclub was called the Playboy Club, but it wasn't Hugh Hefner's Playboy Club. And we're sitting, it's very dark in there. We're sitting, this is, what was it, 1968. We're sitting in a club and every table had these old-fashioned phones on it. So we're sitting there having a drink, and all of a sudden the phone rings. And I'm saying to her, are you expecting a call? And, you know, this place had a lot of single women and single guys. And, you know, it's kind of like how you introduce yourself. And so I pick up the phone and I hear this voice on the other end going, Gene? Yeah, this is Mom. Look up. And there's my father and mother in the balcony of this club waving to me. So, you know, that's how it was, whether we worked together or we hung out together.
They really took care of you.
It was always about that.
Well, anybody who has been lucky enough to have dinner with Gene, he has these amazing stories that cover every decade. And over every single 10 years where popular culture changed every single one of those decades, I would love you to share with all of us, who was the designer that really, through that time period, really knocked people's socks off at Barney's? Like, who really stole the show?
Well, there were many, but for Barney's, my father used to read these Uomo Vogues in the 60s and early 70s, and they were like that thick. And he would sit in his beat-up aim chair. We lived in Harrison, New York, this beautiful home. And I had just started in the business, and the Knicks playoff game was on. And in those days, the TV was about this big, so I was this close to the television. My father liked sports too, but he loved what he did, and he loved the fashion business. And he started going through this magazine, and every 20 minutes he'd say to me, I think this guy's really talented. Beautiful coat, and what do you think? And, you know, I had to be respectful, so I would reply, oh, that's great, Dad, great. But under my breath, I'd say, could you leave me alone? I'm trying to watch the Knicks. And this went on for about an hour, and he finally said to me, well, do you think I should go to Italy and sign this guy to an exclusive deal? Now, this was a period of time where men's designers really hadn't started yet. My father was really responsible for bringing men's designers to America. Brioni and Zegna, and so many designers. This particular guy, he went to Italy, and he did sign him to a deal, and his name was Giorgio Armani. And Giorgio Armani changed menswear forever after that, and also changed Barney's quite a bit. And I think we helped him out too. And so from there, I started seeing really a different type of customer shop at Barney's. And the kids from Saturday Night Live, that show had just started in '75, so they started shopping there. And then, men's started getting more relaxed. It started becoming not so uniform, less suits, more sportswear. It was a whole different ball game. And in '76, I said, I'd like to bring women's to Barney's.
That was your idea, to bring women's.
So, and of course, my father probably under his breath was going, oh my God, he's going to kill me. But he let me do it. And I went to Paris. I had a very good friend who was a buyer, Henry Bendel. In those days, Henry Bendel was the best store in New York, in our opinion. And I had a wonderful buyer there, this young girl I knew. And she turned me on to things. And in those days, Bloomingdale's was the great store. That was really sort of the universe was called Bloomingdale's Country, the Upper East Side. Of course, you had Saks, you had Bonwit Teller. It was really a very good period for women's wear and fashion in general, and also for New York. New York started to evolve, but downtown hadn't happened yet. New York was really that 8 square blocks from Lexington Avenue to 59th Street, going down to First Avenue and up to 62nd or 64th, within that vicinity. And that's where all the action was. And if you were French and you had a really good accent and you came over as a waiter in one of the restaurants, 6 months later, you were now the owner. So I don't know how many of you know Jean de Noyer, but he owns La Galou in town. So I knew him then. He had a wonderful boutique. And that's how it evolved. And so then, as far as getting into women's, I started bringing women's into the store. I had no idea how it would do. And it did pretty well. I was really surprised. And
that's the 70s. We're now mid 75,
76. 76. And I only went to Paris. In those days, there really wasn't showrooms or shows. So there was a big show outside Charles de Gaulle, and there was a big show. So we were on roller skates. I took a men's buyer with me, and for 3 days, we just started buying things I liked. I had no clue what I was doing. I had no budget, no nothing. And of course, when the merchandise came in, it overtook the men's. And I didn't even know where to put this stuff. But women started coming in and shopping. And then it evolved. And then we went to Italy, and we started discovering lots of designers. We brought Prada to this country. Comme des Garçons, I went to Tokyo in '79 and found Yohji Yamamoto and Rei Kawakubo, if you know these designers. My favorite designer in women's of all time was in '79, a little Tunisian man named Azzedine Alaya, who I loved, and we brought him to this country. And so Helmut Lang and Dries Van Noten, and literally hundreds. And my mother also. My mother brought so many lines, Diptyque and Porto and Bonpoint. It was a period of time in the 70s and early 80s that if you had the will and the inclination and the drive to do these things, it was all there for you. The opportunity was there. A lot of them were young designers then. It was a different type of situation. It was very analogous to the film business. When I went to film school between '68 and '72, that period was probably one of the greatest periods of filmmaking ever. And again, it was all about risk-taking, and it was a very exciting period. It was the Wild, Wild West. And then, of course, the stores uptown, Bergdorf's, those stores, they were sitting on their laurels. They were right in the middle of where people lived. So it was easy for them. They've been doing it a long time. And we were downtown, and we were the kids with a chip on our shoulder. So we went to Europe.
But you had a special sauce where, those other stores, didn't have a restaurant upstairs and they didn't have beauty on the bottom floor. And the mix that you guys had was different from a lot of the other retail stores.
It evolved to that. You know, once we started to taste success and we built in late 70s the duplex, which was the first time we built women's for real at Barney's, my father says to me, he says, look, we're getting into this seriously. Before we get into it really seriously, what do you think if we go and buy Henry Bendel? And I said, that's a cool idea. He said, if we call it Barney's Bendel's, I said, yeah. So we put a bid in for Bendel's. Inclusive in the deal was the air rights to the whole, I don't know how much that building would be worth today on 57th Street off 5th, but we put a bid in for $8 million, including the real estate, and it was accepted.
Wow.
And Geraldine Stutz at the time, who was the president, very talented, she had 30 days to match the offer, and she did, like on the 26th day. And so we lost that, and then my father said, okay, let's go into it full-fledged. I'm happy we did. And it just evolved.
But it was a risk. It was a risk doing what you guys did. I don't know if you looked at it like that and you kind of analyzed it before you did it, or you just were, you know, off the cuff and
it was a risk that we enjoyed doing, though. You know, we were lucky enough to be self-financed. You know, the business had been around already for 60 years. And we could do these things. And also we were on a roll because we started when we would go to Europe. And in those days, I had hair like down to here. And I was probably 40 years younger than anybody in a department store. And so the designers related to me, and we used to have a great time. And, you know, I was like this cultural vacuum. I mean, I went to school with Stephen Rebell and Ian Schreger. They were my fraternity brothers, and they started a club called Studio 54. And I did live there for 3 years. So did everybody else that could get in. And so, you know, I just absorbed everything in New York, all the culture, all the people. It was a very exciting time. And fashion was going through the roof. And then in the early 80s, the French, who were generally pretty conservative, they went from the sort of the Yves Saint Laurent, Givenchy kind of thing to the Terry Muglers, the Claude Montanas, the Jean-Paul Gaultiers of the world. And that whole fashion started to change. And then the Italians started to grow up and change. And it just really evolved. The Japanese came in, and a lot of young new kids were opening up their own stores. Retail was a completely different situation than today. Let's be honest, it's a pretty sad story. It probably deserves to be. The difference today and in those days is 3 people own the whole business. And I mean, like Louis Vuitton, for example, you know, Monsieur Arnault, and maybe 2 other people own the whole business. They control everything. I don't have to tell you, I mean, Barney's was not cheap. It was an expensive store, but the prices today are insane. When you, as for a woman, you buy a blouse off the rack for $6,000, a coat for $15,000. It's insulting. It really is. And department stores can't sell this merchandise, so they become, in essence, airport stores. They rent the space to the manufacturer. The manufacturer supplies the salespeople, the merchandise, everything. And so these stores have no point of view anymore, zero. And so the service is questionable. All the boutiques are subsidized by the manufacturers, so they all look the same. And quite frankly, I mean, Saks owns almost everything now. They own Neiman Marcus, they own Bergdorf Goodman, they own...
Those are all real estate buys,
and it's
basically.
All, and honestly, they're in trouble. So I don't know what the state of retail is going to be, but usually when things get this way, the next thing that happens is a good thing. It's almost like a reaction to reaction, and there's a little bit of a revolution. I don't have a crystal ball here, but probably You're going to see small little stores happen again with young people running them with their own point of view. Maybe they'll have a sewing machine in the back. They won't be on the main floor. They'll probably be on the 10th floor somewhere because they can't afford the rent.
It'll be entrepreneurial.
They'll be very entrepreneurial, but it'll be something that'll be creative and that you might want to enjoy seeing. That'll be a surprise. I mean, that's the thing about Barney's is that, you know, our credo was never give the customer what you want because they don't know what they want. You have to show them. So, and customers want that. You know, they want to be surprised. They want to see new things all the time. I'm sorry for going on and on and on, but this is, you know, this is the way
is so
it is.
good. This is what we love about you. So I want to back up for a second though.
Sure.
So the thing that I'm a little bit younger. So
Yes.
anyway, we're like brother and sister. So sorry. We do tease each other a lot. But I remember when I moved to New York and walking into Barney's on Madison Avenue when you guys were uptown was pretty incredible. But the thing that struck me as a young new person moving to New York, and I was in the fashion industry, was that not only were all the designers were there, but there was a vibe in that store that aligned with what was going on in terms of popular culture. So if Mick Jagger or, you know, Elton John or whoever was sort of the big singers at that, you know, the performers at the time, that vibe was in that store. You did things that were innovative and different, and maybe it was intuitive, just in your soul. You kind of knew what to do. Nobody had beauty in the back that would pull somebody all the way into the store to the back of the store. That was kind of genius of you. So my question is, A, how did you know how to do that? And why did you do that? And B, who were sort of the amazing performers that sort of defined fashion and those decades that you're talking about, where it was so exciting?
So Barney's evolved over many, many years. And we learned a lot, both through mistakes and also through successes, what we did. So through this period, the first thing when we decided to go big into women's is we wanted to give women their own separate store. And where in most big stores, it's like a women's store with a men's floor. But with Barney's, it was two separate stores. And so we wanted it to be a sorority and we wanted to be a fraternity. The other unique thing about Barney's, because of all the years that we grew, is that we cater to so many different types of customers. We cater to the Wall Street guy. We catered to the artists because we had the whole bohemian crowd downtown. We catered to the celebrities. We catered to the Europeans. We catered to the Californians. We started catering to the uptown crowd, the downtown crowd.
Celebrities, everybody.
And it was, we called it the magic mix because it was really hard to duplicate, but everybody kind of, even though they're all different, they all felt comfortable in that space. And the unique thing about Barney's, and I think this came from my father and my mother, is that Barney's, even though it was known as setting trends, it wasn't trendy. It was kind of like classic with a twist. Mm-hmm. You know, we'd have the most avant-garde things in a sense, but we didn't hang our hat on it. We cared more about quality and about beauty and about service. And also an interesting environment. And the other thing I think that was unique about Barney's is we had a sense of humor. And I think people really appreciated that because you can't take yourself too seriously, you know, even though we had a serious business. So whether it was Simon Doonan's windows, who, for those of you who know Simon, I think Simon was the most, he's speaking at the Flagler, I think tomorrow actually, or this week, but to me, he was the most brilliant window designer ever. He happens to live in Palm Beach.
It had a whimsical feel to it a lot of times.
He had a total sense of humor, whether he put Margaret Thatcher in there, Madonna in there. It didn't matter who it was in there. He just, people loved his windows. We featured a lot of artists when they first started out. we worked with great architects. And, you know, Peter Marino, we started his career. He never sent me a residual check, but I think he's doing pretty well. So the design, I think the flow and the design, we're the first store really to appreciate light and air. So we opened up the space. We opened up our windows. We had atriums so that people could feel like, you know, it's an enjoyable space. And I always felt that, you know, shopping is like being in theater. So in the case of our Beverly Hills store, everybody there thinks they're a movie star. So we built this huge staircase with an atrium. And then when people would walk down the staircase, you know, they would think, wow, I'm like cool because I'm a movie star walking. And then on every floor, they would interact with, you know, customers. And it wasn't just the merchandise. It was seen and be seen. As you said, we started to add food. And humbly speaking, I think we were pretty good at food. Fred's was pretty good. For those of you who are New Yorkers, we own many restaurants. We own Coco Pazzo and La Madre, and we own Barney Greengrass in LA. And whatever we did, we really felt that we had to pay attention to detail and present it. We weren't a store doing these things. It was, I don't know, it was like this living, breathing. I think we added culture to New York, and I think certainly New York contributed to Barney's in so many ways. So it was this collaborative mix, and it just happened. It was the only time it was really scary, like super scary, is when in 1990, we took on a very wealthy Japanese partner, or 89, and we decided that we wanted to go uptown. This was our dream, because we felt if we ever opened a big store uptown, let the games begin. Because, you know, we were downtown, we had a great business, but to be uptown where all the customers were, it was like a dream come true. And it was a dream I think my father had since the 50s and 60s. So it was scary because this store was 280,000 feet that we're building uptown. And now we had to buy for it, which was really scary. And also, you know, because we always catered to downtown, uptown is more classic. So then we had to figure out, okay, how much should we change our mix? Because if we changed it too much, I think a lot of people would be disappointed because they saw us as sort of the younger, cooler store. Mm-hmm. So it was a dance. We had brilliant people at Barney's, by the way. I mean, the Pressmans could not have done this without the incredible merchants and, again, display. And in advertising, you know, we have had a history of marketing and advertising since my grandfather. My grandfather was one of the first retailers to ever be on radio. He started, Dinah Shore started her career singing jingles for Barney's. He did for the Lindbergh trials, Barney's was a sponsor.
Wow,
really? In
wow.
1949, we were the first retailer to advertise on television. So it was this very rich kind of history of marketing and advertising. And then my father came in, and because he upgraded Barney's, again, as I said, Barney's was a men's discounter, a huge promoter. My grandfather promoted so much that it used to annoy the hell out of people. When you got in a taxi, you never said to him, take me to 7th Avenue and 17th Street. You'd say, take me to Barney's. And then the taxi cab driver would go, you mean 7th Avenue and 17th Street? So we kind of became part of the vernacular, which was amazing. This was all through marketing. And then when women's came in, the agencies were great, brilliant, but they were great at selling Purdue chicken and cars, you know, and things like that. And for me, we had to be in the high fashion business. So I started to take art directors from the best magazines. And then I realized I had to bring everything in-house. So some of the greatest people in the industry came through our doors. I don't know if you know who Stephen Meisel is, but he's one of the greatest photographers in the world. And on one of our first shoots in the late 70s, our art director, Mark Ballard, who was the art director and editor-in-chief of Interview magazine then, he had to rent Stephen a camera because Stephen didn't even have a camera. So, you know, these are wild stories that happened that we went through.
You didn't need much advertising because really walking up Madison Avenue with the Barney's bag was, you know, that was almost enough. A lot of us have been kind of following Gene's journey and his book tour and your segment on MSNBC. I thought was so interesting, and I thought, you know, what Mika said to you was, why did you write the book? And I loved your answer, and I want you to kind of talk about that a little bit because the book is really amazing for the people who haven't read it. And it's just a beautiful compilation of, I think, kind of the most exciting time, you know, in fashion and popular culture. Now we're faced with AI, which is like so flat and, you know, not as interesting to all of us. But so set the record straight. Why'd you write the book?
Well, this is my second book. I wrote my first book 15 years ago. First, let me say I love collaboration. I've always loved collaboration. I love working with other people. No one has all the answers. And my first book was I collaborated with a young guy who is now the CEO of Acorn. If you know, that's the largest online banking company. This book, I collaborated with Matthew Schneier, who's the food critic for New York Magazine. He's a brilliant writer, wrote for New Yorker, New York Times, Wall Street Journal,
writer.
Went to Yale, blah, blah, blah. And when I interviewed him, he had the same nutty sense of humor that I did. And he was such a lovely guy when I first met him. And I think he's become so sarcastic now. But it took us almost 3.5 years to write. Very lucky that we have what I think is the preeminent publisher in the world in Viking, which was Jackie O's publishing company. It's very hard to get a book published now. I don't know if you know that or not. Almost impossible. So we were lucky enough to do it. The reason why I wanted to write is because there have been many stories over the years told about Barney's. Some being true, some being exaggerated, some being folklore, some being not true, a lot of embellishments. So I felt it was time to get the record straight. And the experience of writing this book, I mean, I learned a lot because we interviewed many, many people. And when you're writing a book that's your memoir, it's kind of like an outer mind, out of body experience because, at least for me, because I didn't want to embellish. I wanted it as though if I was writing this book, I was the reader and I wanted to tell it like it really was. Sorry for the cliche. And so I want to see if my story corroborated with a lot of other people. Matthew did an incredible amount of research. And it was fun writing the book. And some of the stories, oh yeah, I remember that. And I tried to temper myself a little bit about some of the nightlife experiences, as I also was forthcoming, but it was a different period of time. I did not look like Harvey Weinstein, so obviously I could have fun, and it was a mutual experience, but it was a wild time. I mean, a really wild time. And I enjoyed, I mean, it was very analogous to running Barney's, to be honest with you, because nothing gave me greater pleasure than seeing our customers enjoy the store. When I used to go into Bergdorf's and I see hundreds of the black shopping bags that said Barney's, I love that. And when people read the book now and they really enjoyed the book, it's what it's about.
It's really your voice, Gene. It's really your voice.
He did a great job. I consider myself a creative person. So, you want to be appreciated, but you also want to be able to be appreciated not narrowly by as many people as you can reach without watering down what you're trying to say. So
you did a fantastic job. The book is, I think it's number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list. I was at LaGuardia Airport on Saturday, and there it was, number 3. So it's pretty exciting that you accomplished that. It's a fantastic read. And for all of us that love Gene, his heart and soul really comes through that. So thank you for joining us today on Good Day Palm Beach.
Perfectly Palm Beach Candles and Diffusers, the official scent of Good Day Palm Beach, can be found at Hive, Lily Pulitzer, and many more local stores. Also online at perfectlypb.com. The perfect Palm Beach gift. Privet Palm Beach Presents is a production of Privet Studios and is available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify platforms. You could reach out to us on Instagram at Privet Palm Beach and at theprivet.com. Thanks to the Privet Studios team, including Summers Laffey, Will Cannon, our friends at Mass Inbound, and music by Kevin MacLeod.